Good morning, good afternoon at this point. This is podcast episode number 14. We have Kevin Matos here today with us. Very, very excited to have him joining. A little bit about Kevin before we kind of hop into this. So Kevin, formerly known as Seven, is the founder of Profit Rocket Club, PRC, which is an ecosystem that introduces financial literacy to the youth and minorities across the world. The club provides guidance on traditional stock market investing, options trading, credit repair strategies, and so much more. So can't wait to hear more about it and really dive into today's topic. Kevin, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just happy to be here. I love what I do. I love outreaching people. I'm ready to tell my story.
Sounds great. So with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and kind of talk about, we obviously met at Penn State, but what have you been up to and really what's your trajectory been to get you to this point and starting PRC?
For sure. Yeah. So, I was very fortunate after graduating from Penn State. I really had a job already lined up, with the Police Athletic League, and I was a program manager. And I was really living in my purpose there because I was working with kids. I love kids. And I was working with sports. I love sports. So my job was really just being an event coordinator for different activities all throughout New York and all five boroughs, right? I got promoted very fast. I was just doing what I love to do, and it never felt like work, right? But the thing was that it was a nonprofit. So with that being said, nonprofit doesn't always, pay the bills, and I live in New York. So it's one of those things where I always had to hustle and do more, right? So I was taking a whole bunch of other like different side jobs because, I really enjoyed what I was doing. But I also have to put myself into consideration and, my family and be a provider, so from there, I really started to, pick up habits like reading self-help books and, revolving around financial literacy, mental health, personal growth, things like that, and from there, I just started getting more exposed to things that I also found a lot of joy in, which of course was just learning about money, how money works, right? What's the power of investing, how to build the credit, how to utilize it, all things of that nature. Because where I come from, humble beginnings in the Bronx, New York, that's not really something that we're exposed to, right? So I wanted to be that trailblazer from my family and my community, to be that person to learn as much as I possibly can, then start exercising it and then relay it back to them from someone that actually achieved what people thought was impossible.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Yeah, definitely key point, humble beginnings and then giving back. So that sounds like really what the company is doing. So, makes sense what led you to start it. And then, tell us a little more, what the company is and what the day-to-day really goals are.
For sure. So in Profit Rocket Club, I started investing in the market really while I was in college. So it was more so on the small scale. I'm a business major. So, when we would walk to class, we would have, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, that would be something that we're exposed to. So for me, at first, I'll be like, what am I looking at? What's going on here? There's just numbers everywhere. It's a little bit of intimidation, going on because of the overwhelming information that I just didn't really know how to internalize and just understand. So
Right.
from there, I was just a very small investor, so I knew the bare minimum, right? But I was involved in the market, and it really, once I graduated and started taking things more seriously, that I started educating myself, and then I actually started trading. So from there, once I started trading, just buying low, selling high, very simple strategy. And it was more so on the stock side, so buying equity, selling it, making a couple nickels and a couple dimes, right? Nothing crazy whatsoever. But once I got really, really serious, I actually started seeing that I can actually make some good money from this, right? And the side hustle and the habit, it started transitioning into my full time. And I started seeing that I was making more money from the stock market than my actual job. So
Wow.
from there, right, definitely, and it was an interesting time in my life. And from there, then I transitioned from just stocks into options. Once I got into options trading, where it's a little bit different from stocks. There's higher risk, right? But higher reward, especially when you know what you're doing. So once I got involved into options trading, I started making life-changing money, the money that I've never seen before. And I just kept putting in the work and showing up every day, being consistent. And that led me to, develop a tribe and a strong following on social media, and I was just sharing ideas, right? Just not going, telling people that I'm a professional or anything. I'm just saying I'm just sharing my ideas. I am not a financial advisor or anything like that, right? I'm just a guy that's just sharing the vibe. So from there, once my following really grew like exponentially on all platforms, then it was one of those things where I was like, hey, I should just start a community from this and get people organized, because I'm learning as I go as well, and I'm getting better. But I know that even if I don't have 20 years of experience, I have enough that I can help somebody else that has none, right? So from there, once I got into options trading and I started making consistent gains after a year, I bet on myself, and I ended up starting Profit Rocket Club with the intention of serving people that just didn't have the information, that don't, from minorities to people that high schoolers, right? Young teens. Like, I wish when I was in high school that I was being exposed to this, because if I knew what I know now when I was 16 years old, maybe my life would be a little bit different. I mean, it's great right now, don't get me wrong, but having that information is definitely advantageous. So that's really what motivated me to start Profit Rocket Club. And as far as the day to day, I love what I do. We have a morning show Monday through Friday, an hour before pre-market. We talk about what's going on in the market, what are some potential ideas, right? Whether it is trading, but we also talk about investing. It's not just quick, fast money, risky business, right? We really want to learn how money works, how the banks work, right? How the stock market works. This is stuff that's really important. It's never going to go away. So we should probably learn about it, So we're talking about that. We also talk about, real life things. It's not always just about the stock market. We talk about how to build your credit. We talk about the importance of daily habits. We talk about physical health, mental health, spirituality, right? It's really an ecosystem that just promotes being 1% better and becoming the best version of yourself. So that's really the mission for Profit Rocket Club on a day-to-day.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow. Okay. That definitely summed it up. I appreciate that, because there's a lot of different tidbits there that I hope for us to kind of break out. Starting hopefully first with the market, and with all your experience and knowledge now, ironically, you're saying you're not a financial advisor, you're not an expert, but now I think you are. So I mean, kudos to you, kudos to your team. So with that expertise, what do you see the market as right now? Where do you see it going? Again, I know, no one can predict anything, but
Right,
what's
right, right.
that hot topic right now on the show then? What are you seeing?
I mean, current day, 2023, right? It's really an opportunity. And it goes back to the saying, especially in the financial world, where they say, be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. When we go back to like 2020, 2021, there was a lot of greed everywhere, right? And a lot of money was made. But 2022, especially towards the second half, it wasn't as fruitful as the previous times. And then now we're really getting the real impact of that, where a lot of people are fearful because the market aren't at all-time highs anymore, right? When it comes to stocks, Forex, cryptos, all different commodities, they're not, as bullish as people would like, where people were, oh, I'm gonna just buy it, and they think that it goes straight up. No, that's not the way it works. So it's one of those things where there's opportunities everywhere. You have a lot of like your major favorite companies that have had different stock splits that are giving entries for everyone, where it's not just a game for people who are multimillionaires. Now you have average families that can afford to get in the game, right? To start their financial journey without having the extreme risk of losing everything on like your memes or whatever, like AMC and GameStop, right? Like now you have an entry to get into real companies that are going to be around for a good time and a long time, right? Like what, Amazon, your Apples, your Nvidias, you still got Microsoft, you have Google. Even if you wanted to just go in the ETF route and play it a little safer, you still have SPY that's, has drawn back. But when you look historically, SPY is always going to win and persevere, right? The market's always going to survive. And right now it's really just being someone who puts the work in to get the education, someone that's showing up with confidence, and then really just betting on yourself and being patient. You don't have to bet the house on anything, but it's just opportunity, right? It's opportunity. And that's really the main thing that I see right now in the market.
Okay. So then, someone getting started. So you're saying a couple things that maybe I'm familiar with, maybe some of our listeners are familiar with, but if someone's saying, all right, enough is enough, I'm going to start, whether it be financial trading, I'm going to look into things, I'm going to download an app, I'm going to, start to see what stocks I could buy, and then, move things around and sell and this and that. What's sort of like the advice that you would give for someone who may feel it's incredibly daunting? Someone who's saying, this just sounds very out of my realm. I'm afraid to play with my money. It's my money. I've earned it. Now, where do I put it? How do I know the right stock is the right stock? Where does that look like for you? What are you telling people?
Now, I mean, it's definitely it's not a one answer to that question. And what I mean by that is that, you said great things there, where it's like, it's my money, I worked hard for it. That's one of the main messages that I tell to our community in Profit Rocket Club. It's like, you worked hard for your money, don't just gamble it away. There's a difference between gambling and making financially educated decisions, right? And from there, it comes down to the education. I can't stress that enough. And for me, I that was my biggest priority. Like, I'm right next to my library, so this is not an endorsement. It's just the first book that I saw, but this is something that helped me. Rich Dad Poor Dad, very fundamental stuff, right? I have a whole bunch of books that I could recommend, and for me, I believe that leaders are readers. So you want to be the leader for your family. You want to be that person that starts that financial renaissance and starts getting into the market and nobody else has. Like me, I was the only one, and now I'm not the only one anymore. But it came down to the education, reading books, YouTube videos, paying for courses, and it's something that I take very seriously, because you either pay to know or you pay for not knowing, right? Because you're going to miss out, 10, 20 years from now on financial gains that you could have obtained from the market, right? For your future. These are things that, you can change your life from, right? So it comes down to the education. I put in a lot of hours reading books. I still read books because the journey doesn't stop. I put in a lot of hours watching videos. I still watch videos because the journey doesn't stop. And I put in a lot of time networking. That's a really huge component as well, where, like, you want to be around like-minded people, because if you change the conversation, you start changing the compensation. So if you're not around anybody that's talking about the market, that's talking about how can I make more money, how can I increase my cash flow, right? What is this market stuff? What is investing? Like, if you're not having those conversations, that's the problem. So, because it takes a village. I will never be able to say that I've gotten to the level where I'm at to be a CEO of my own company, to be a full-time trader, to have other businesses open up and have the network that I have without using the network that I have, right? I've developed relationships where now I'm getting poured into, and I'm always learning and growing and being challenged, where I'm like, okay, whatever I thought the ceiling was doesn't exist, because there's always something more to learn and grow from. So, it really comes down to the education. That's something that I would really stress to anybody just starting out. And I think, just to go elaborate more on the second part, is really have confidence, because it's something that's really scary, when it comes to your money. You don't want to just lose it and burn cash, right? Especially in this economy that we're in now. You want to protect as much cash flow and your assets as possible, but it's one of those things that you just can't be afraid. You have to bet on yourself, where, for me, I've put in enough work where I was really confident, and sometimes I still failed, and that's okay, because I was confident enough to keep going, because I know, the end justifies the means. I know what the goal is. I know this isn't a get rich quick scheme. I know that, 10 years, 20 years from now, I'm going to get and benefit from the fruits of my labor of what I'm doing today. You know what I mean? So it's really just confidence and getting started. That's something that I would tell somebody getting started.
I think there's a couple really great key points. I mean, all of it was great, but a couple things to highlight with, changing the conversation changes compensation, right? So those two correlations, people talk all the time about who you surround yourself with. And I think you really touched on that. And maybe people forget about that when it comes to financial, well-being, that your friends too also, and who you're surrounding yourself with, if they're out, partying and only concerned with certain things and not still focused on, that work life balance of, all right, yeah, let me have fun, but let me also make sure that my money is working for me too, so that I can have fun. I think that's crucial. And then not to mention that everything you led up from there of education, but bringing it all back to the fact that if you don't invest the time, no pun intended on investments, it's not going to
Right.
be a get rich quick. That's not what this is, and it's never going to be that. And there could be occasionally opportunities where you get a good amount of money quickly, but that's not going to happen every single time because that's not the end goal, which I think is really great to continue to highlight. Plus, you mentioned networking. So talking
Mhm.
about networking and what that does for you as it relates to branding yourself. How do you brand yourself to make sure you're networking with the right people? Why is that so important? And what does networking kind of bring you to that branding?
Right. No, that's a great question. I think I'll start off with really being organic and authentic, right? And furthermore, just being yourself. That's something that I really pride myself on, is that I'm always myself, no matter what room I'm in, no matter who I'm speaking with, and it comes down to you're either gonna rock with me or you're not. And that's okay, right? Because as long as you're moving with integrity and righteousness, right? And you're putting in the work and you have good intentions, you're gonna attract the right people. It's just the law of attraction. People fall in love with building in public, right? That's really one of the main things with how you brand yourself is build in public. So that's what I found. A lot of people that follow me now, they love that about me because I was super transparent all the time, right? Where when I did make $96,000 in the stock market overnight, I shared that, right? And people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible." I'm like, "Guys, this was not luck. This was not something that just happened. This is not like I can't do this all the time. I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. I was in the right position at the right time and I executed and I bet on myself, right? And that was the outcome. But I also share the other side of the fence. That's not sunflowers and rainbows, right? Where coming from humble beginnings, I've lost $15,000 in about 3 blinks, right? That's embarrassing for me to even tell my mother. Like, yeah, I just lost this amount of money that it takes what, maybe 3 months for most people for that, maybe more for people to make, right? And I lost that in a couple blinks. And it was just something that was just an irresponsible situation, but the reality of the possibility and the risk that comes with being involved in the market, but more specifically trading. So it's really building in public, being, someone that moves with integrity is not for sale. Always be yourself. And that's something that I can't stress enough of building a brand, where it's like you're gonna like it or you're not, and that's fine. And if you do, great. If you don't, I'm still going to try to figure out and reflect on why. Maybe why am I not reaching people the way that I'm reaching other people? And that allows me to just analyze myself to be better, right? And just being active as well. Where what helped me build my brand very quickly was really communicating with people, not just posting and coming back later, or showing off or anything like that. Like, no, I'm really talking to people. I'm responding to DMs, or if I'm on Twitter, we're engaging, we're having fun, right? If it's not fun, what are we doing? Right? So for me, I was definitely always looking to make my account and my profile not only always business. Like, we have fun too. So, when I'm talking about the market, and making money, right? I'm also talking about going to the gym and simple things like making your bed in the morning, right? Like waking up and drinking water. So I'm talking about good habits, physical health, mental health, like reading, right? All those different things. So, me being versatile and not being just that one-dimensional kind of profile that I was able to attract a lot of different people and really, get them to follow me, trust me, believe in me, and then we just move forward. And that's something that has never changed since I started my brand, and I'm never going to change that.
Such crucial points, so important, and I think really great for the listeners as well.
Mhm.
So we talked, what do you do to start out and what that advice is, and then the branding, the networking. But what if someone, aside from all of this, is just trying to improve where they are right now, and maybe they have a poor credit score, or maybe they're at a high and their credit score is great, but they'd like to improve it even better. With you mentioning that being something part of PRC also,
Mhm.
what's something you can say to people who, they're going to take all your advice, they're going to do all the things, but in addition to that, they need to just better where they are right now. So they need to improve that credit score. What are kind of those first couple things that someone can do to see that return on improving the credit score?
Sure. For the first part, as far as just being better in their life, right? You know, absorbing content, the right content, that's great, but it's not enough, right? So like what I mean where is that you can watch, 10 videos, you can read 30 books, right? But actually being active and getting experience on the field, that's what's where you're really going to get the benefits from. And also, even with that, there's still other levels and other steps, like getting in the room. That's something that I really stress to my audience, where, it can't just be you're seeing a tweet or a post on LinkedIn or on Instagram and you get inspired for 5 minutes, right? It's something that you want to be around the people as much as you possibly can. So when there's like a Zoom, like a conference, right, a webinar, a virtual webinar, or there's actual symposium or a conference in person, get in the room. I think for me, one of the biggest defining moments in my entire life was making a big financial risk in myself, an investment in myself, right? But I got the return literally the first day. It was a 3-week conference. It was in Atlanta, and it cost $5,000. For me, I'm again, I keep going back to this because I want to make sure that, you know, I, everybody knows that it's possible no matter where you are on the ladder, no matter how many resources you have, no matter if you come from a 1 or 2 parent household or any of that stuff. I come from very humble beginnings. I'm not sure how my mom got me to or was able to afford for me to go to Penn State, but she pulled it off, right? And it's one of those things where $5,000 at the time for me was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. And that was just for the ticket. That didn't include the hotel, that didn't include the flight. So I made a really, really big investment, scary investment in myself. But the return of being in the room changed my life. It changed the way that I thought. It changed the way that I perceive things, right? And even now, I'm still investing myself because now I'm addicted to the outcome. I just love learning and being in the room, the energy that you get and the conversations, the networking, because if there's people in that room, they either know somebody or know something, or they probably think like you do, right, and can help you. So I can't stress that enough. Get in the room, get in the room, get in the room, but the right rooms, right? Now, as far as like going into building up your credit, that's like one of the biggest cheat codes to really wealth and luxury and flexibility and comfortability, if you know how to utilize it correctly. And I pride myself on this conversation because being from New York, I was scammed before. Like me being a nice guy, I'm never going to forget this. And it's one of those things that like, oh, you're so silly, but it is what it is. I've been through it, and I moved along and I've learned from it. But I went and I was going through to therapy because I was in a car accident, right? And I left therapy. Everything's great, thank God, right? But I left therapy, and there was this kid outside. He was about 12 to 13 years old, maybe, like a really young kid. And he had one shoe on, right? He looked like he was going through it all. He was like, oh, like I work this job and I need somebody to deposit money. Like, please, I'll give you $30, da da da. At the time, I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So ultimately, just a long story short, like I got really finessed by this kid. I got scammed. And I ended up having like my bank account drained, my credit score shot. It was pretty crazy. And from there, I had to rebuild my credit from zero. And it took a really long time. It took actually years, right? But that was because I didn't know the strategies that I know now. I was figuring it out along the way. But now it's like there's so many things that you can do to improve that with speed, and it really comes down to responsibility. You want to tackle, especially there's multiple ways that you could go about this, but you want to tackle the lowest credit card bills that you have, if you have multiple, and knock them out and get them out the way. Because what you want to do is you want to consolidate your debt. You don't want to have balances on 5 different cards. You want to have balances on one card. Now, some people might say, oh, get the biggest one first. And that's a strategy that works for certain people, and that's fine. But for me personally, I found that it was a lot easier to have a peace of mind where I know I'm checking off the checklist. All right, Now this is done, I could focus on this. All right, now this is done, I could focus on that, right? And that gave me a peace of mind of just being responsible, not paying the minimum payments and trying to be smooth, right? It's literally just breaking it down, making sure that you have no debt, making sure you never have a late payment. That is so important. Never, ever, ever, ever miss a payment. Make sure you're paying on time, but consolidating that debt. And once you have no credit card debt, you'll find that that in addition to keeping the utilization low, your credit score is going to skyrocket very quickly. So, it shows responsibility. And, when you're communicating with these actually credit card bureaus, that helps a lot too. So for me, every 3 months, I'm actually calling them. I'm calling the banks and I'm having a conversation with them. And I'm asking them for either credit line increases, or I'm asking them, what are they looking for me to get that, right? Because the higher the limit, the less utilization rate, so I can actually use it more. And what happens is I use these credit cards for points and different benefits that fund my lifestyle. So, for example, I'm an American Express enthusiast. I love Amex. And what I use that for is almost everything, because I get so many points for that. I accumulate those points and I use those points for flights, hotels, a whole bunch of different other, leisures, going to different lounges and that are available at airports that are only for American Express holders. And that's just one of the few benefits that you get from having a high credit score. We could talk about this all day.
Right.
There's other, right? Like
So many
when you
ways,
get a
so many
car,
things.
right? Yeah, so many things. And that's why it's so important. If you're buying a car, they're gonna check your credit. Based on your credit score, how responsible you are, you're gonna have a lower payment than somebody else. So why wouldn't you prioritize that? When you buy a home, it's the same thing. I was just talking to my friend actually this weekend, and he just moved into a 3-family home. Like, it's beautiful, it's amazing, right? And I'm like, how much did you put down on this house? He was like, I didn't put anything down. I have good credit. I was like, I've never even heard of that before. But
Neither have
shout
I.
out,
Wow.
I was like, shout out to you, right? Like,
Something
I
to
need to talk
aspire
to that
to.
person. Right. I'm like,
Wow.
no, nothing, and it's one of those things where it's like, you start being exposed to all of these different benefits and luxuries. It's a huge priority. You want to have the best credit score that you have. I'm not talking about having an 800. If you want to achieve that, that's fine. But over 700 is almost mandatory, and it's something that everybody can achieve.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I mean, your friend, we got to get him on too. Tell us all his like, that's amazing.
Right,
Like,
right,
definitely,
right.
definitely appreciate all the advice. And I think if we can kind of now transition to, not only your personal life, but now work life for somebody, right? Let's say you're a leader. What advice do you have for leaders in any capacity of how they can better lead their teams to be better individuals in the workplace, also personal, because it all really goes hand in hand.
100%. 100%. I'm a believer that, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So, you want to lead by example. You always want to lead by example, and you always want to effectively communicate, over communicate. And it's really a never ending process. There's always opportunities to grow. You should be seeking that. Hold yourself to a higher standard. Where for me in my community, like, I do 5 a.m. wake ups, and my goal is to be the first one to check in, right? My goal is to really inspire, my team, right? And where I show them, like, hey, like, I'm working my butt off right now. I want you guys to meet me halfway, match my energy, so it's just leading by example. We're talking about different books that we've read. We're talking about different videos, like positive content, and it's one of those things where that energy is contagious, because it starts from the top and it goes down. It doesn't start from the bottom and goes up. So as a leader, you want to be that person that is over delivering and always looking to grow and making sure that they're bringing their team with them. For example, when I'm like working out or anything like that, I'm telling everybody, all right, I'm in the gym, summer's almost here, guys, get in the gym, right? Or I'm like, oh, there's a conference here, who wants to go? Let's go. I'll go with you. Like, things like that, just making sure that I'm including them in my process. And it goes back to what I said earlier: building in public. It's never perfect, right? It's never, and it never will be, but they see, the efforts that you're putting in. You're always trying to grow, and you fail, and they'll see you fall, especially your team. They'll see you fail, but they'll also see you continue. They'll also see you having a never quit attitude. They'll also see you being solution oriented. They'll also see, oh, I have a problem, but how am I going to solve this problem? And then when you solve it, it's like, oh, okay. So now your standard is so high, the team standard is going to elevate with yours. That's definitely what I would say for leaders.
And when do you think a leader should step up, and when should they let their team take the lead? When should they then fall back? Because I think that's a common thing that leaders forget. Sometimes it's okay. You don't have to lead 24/7. So what's that right time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's something I struggled with, where I struggled with delegating and trusting because as you have that, oh, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. Like I could just do
Right.
it. I know,
Yeah.
the standard, but you'll drive yourself crazy, because you can't do everything. You can't learn everything. You can try, but it's gonna be very difficult. You need a team and you need people around you that you can trust to execute the tasks that you need to be executed on and trust that they're going to give it their very best. And if it isn't, those are teachable moments, so it depends on the priority of the task. So for me, like I love being involved in the field, so I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and getting my boots on the ground, but in certain situations, things can be overwhelming and I do have to delegate. And what I do is I put people in the positions of their strengths, so if I know somebody is really good on back end, creating websites, creating graphics, things like that. Those are the tasks that I'm going to give him. I can do that. And I think I'm pretty good at it, but I know that that's very time consuming and I can't focus on those things because it's going to take me away from things that are more important. So, not that that's not important, but is a priority list. I have to trust that the person I'm giving that task with is going to execute it. And I have to make sure that if it's good, give them the confidence and affirmation to keep doing it. And if it's not so great, just it's a teachable moment. All right, you should do it this way better, and just trust that this is just a part of the process. And when you're overly communicating and you're coming from a place of where you care, right, and you're looking for them to grow, they're gonna go harder for you too. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna be like, oh, okay. Like for me, everybody calls me Seven. Like, oh, Seven actually cares. I appreciate you. And I'm like, yeah, I appreciate you because it takes it's about the ecosystem that we're trying to impact. So the goal is for everyone to level up, together. That's something that I would really strongly recommend for other leaders is really just communicating and delegating, delegating, because you cannot do everything by yourself.
Have to delegate. Gonna drive yourself crazy. Could not agree more. Before we sort of start to conclude things, you had this common theme about betting on yourself. So I'm sure that's how it's gonna tie in. So I wanna choose the answer for you, but how do you recruit yourself, right? This term recruit me. How do you go out into the world and recruit yourself every day?
For sure. I think it's really just holding yourself to a high standard, right? Like I mentioned, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So it's like, okay, when I dress, when I speak, the way that I present myself, right? The eye contact that I make when I'm communicating with somebody for the first time, the way that I am with my integrity, when I'm making sure that I'm always honest, I move with honor, so I never make sure, I try to make sure that I'm never like leading anybody astray or anything like that, so I think those good habits, and in addition to all the other habits that you have in your life, from the things that you eat, the things that you're doing on a day, like if you're going to the gym, if you're reading, what are you listening to, what's the frequency that you're absorbing, once you have that higher self version that you're always striving to be, that's going to allow you to have energy that is just contagious, right? And I think that helps you stand out, and it makes the standard that's your normal, so you're always pushing yourself, and then now that higher version of yourself is your normal. So I think it's really just being confident enough to take those leaps and doing things that are uncomfortable, and to circle it all back, doing the things that make you uncomfortable, but also getting in the room, because that's what's going to change everything. And once you're around other people that are higher versions of themselves, that are the cream of the crop, the 1%, whatever you want to call them, right? That's going to all trickle down into your life and your habits and your thought process and how you move. And that's what I would think when I say, or when I think about recruit me.
Hopefully our listeners get into the right rooms and have confidence, put themselves first, bet on themselves, start small, and do all the things, all your advice. Most importantly, where can our listeners find you? Obviously, LinkedIn. You mentioned that you have a morning call Monday through Friday. So where should they go to make sure they can keep up with your content?
For sure. So I'm active on all platforms on LinkedIn, but on Instagram and on Twitter, the handle is the same. It's at 7VMX. And you guys can find me there for anything financial literacy, anything mental health, spiritual, because I go by something called the five riches of man. So very briefly, it's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, relationship health, and finally, of course, what we're talking about, financial health. So those are the five riches of man. And that's what you'll find on my page, really just somebody who's down to earth. No matter where I am in my life, how successful I am, the different things that I'm really excited to accomplish this year and then for the years to come. I'm always going to be myself. And my goal is that when you do come across me and come across my pages, you will find joy and leave better than before you got there. So at 7VMX on all platforms.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining today and for all the advice and the content. I can't thank you enough. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I appreciate you so much, Katarina. Thank you so much for the time and everything. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye to everybody and see you next time on an episode of Recruit Me.
Let's get it. Let's get it.